field of expertise and completed a master's degree in gender research and established herself, as you've just heard, as the diversity expert. Rikki now delivers keynote presentations and workshops on both gender equality and speaking, and has developed a reputation for engaging audiences, we have been engaged, and entertaining and using her really inspiring stories. So please welcome Rikki Arundel.
How many of you can think of an occasion, an event, something that happened after which your life would never be the same again? How many of you have had an occasion when that's happened? Okay, that's most of you. I think we'll have all the hands up by the end. Because I want you to start thinking, as we're going through this, about these events. Because storytelling as a speaker is very much about trying to find those events, those occasions when something happened and life would never be the same again. Because that's really what we're trying to do. We actually, the greatest thing that can happen for any speaker is if you become the event for which other people's lives will never be the same again. How many of you have ever heard a speaker and know that after that speech, that's changed your life, that's changed your direction? Yeah. So some of you have actually had a redirection of your life. So let me just give you two stories. I just want to contrast these two stories particularly, because you've already heard a little bit about one of them. It was October 1987. I boarded a flight from Gatwick Airport to fly to Minneapolis, Minnesota. First time I'd ever been to Minneapolis. I worked for a large American software house based in Texas, and we were holding our one of our conferences for all of our users in Minneapolis, and I arrived there not knowing a thing about baseball. Now you think, what on earth has baseball got to do with high tech? Well, actually a lot, because the Minnesota Twins had just qualified for the World Series. Now, for those of you who understand nothing about baseball, let me explain this. In America, they have a World Series, which is the finals of the big baseball competition. They call it the World Series, and yet only Americans participate. This is America, okay? But the Minnesota Twins had just qualified. So when I got there, not only were all our customers in the Marriott Hotel in Wales, it was packed full of people from everywhere who were coming because their local town, for the first time in its 60-odd-year history, was going to be competing against the St. Louis Cardinals for the accolade of the best baseball team for the year. Sadly, there were some rogues amongst them, some of whom raided my hotel room the second night I was there, stealing most of my clothes, my passport, my suitcase, and pretty much everything. So wiped me out. And they've apparently been doing this all over the hotel. The Marriott wasn't prepared to admit it. I did get some compensation from it, but it messed up my week just a little bit. Instead of just flying from Minneapolis then on to Austin and then flying home, I then had to go via New York, where I had to negotiate my way out of America and get a piece of paper to enable me to negotiate my way back in to Britain, because trust me, getting back into Britain without a passport is not easy. When I flew back, finally, we flew back in to Gatwick, and I'm looking around thinking, oh my God, the night before I'd heard there were some storms, but I could not believe the debris of millions of trees all over the place. As I'm flying in, you could see these trees just lying down as the plane landed. Now, that was a week of high drama. But the reality is nothing much happened after that, because eventually everything just went back to normal and it was forgotten. I got a new passport, I got some new clothes, I got some compensation, the trees were replanted, and life went on. So sometimes big drama isn't necessarily the great story. Fast forward to July the 14th, 1995. I boarded a plane from Heathrow Airport, bound for Minneapolis, Minnesota, for my second trip to Minneapolis. Now this was a different trip. And what had happened was I'd been a member of Toastmasters for 5 years. And I had always had this real problem. I'd gone to Toastmasters, even though I was already speaking professionally. And I'd gone there because I wanted to learn how to get better at it, and that was helpful. I got some feedback, but it wasn't really the kind of feedback that I needed as a speaker to develop a professional skill, because most of this was people who'd never spoken before, and they were giving me feedback. But I entered the competitions. I was very good at it. Philip Campani kept beating me every bloody year. But no, I let him off that. So we battled our way through. And I was talking to somebody at one of the clubs. He said, "Why don't you join the NSA?" I said, "The who? The National Security?" No, he said, no, the National Speakers Association. They're in America. I said, "Okay." I looked up National Speakers Association. This was pre-internet. Finally got the information. $400 a year. Bloody hell! What am I going to get for that? Can't even attend the meetings. But I thought, but at least I'm going to connect with these people. I get the monthly magazine coming in there, and I'd be one of 6 people in Britain who were members of the NSA. So I joined the National Speakers Association, paid my fees, and I started to contact these 6 other members. Some of them didn't come back, but 2 or 3 of them did. And one, Alan Lord, said, "Hey, you've got to come to the convention." I said, "What?" He said, "We have this big convention in the States. You should come to it." So I booked my flight to Minneapolis, boarded the flight, and off I went to Minneapolis there. Well, sometimes events can shake you a bit. That one utterly and completely blew me away. If you've never been to a national NSA convention, put it on your bucket list. Because just something about arriving at this huge hotel, big luxury hotel, 2,500 speakers, 13 concurrent sessions, 4 days of just constantly attending the most amazing speeches you could have ever seen, sitting around in the corridors. You sit down to lunch and I've got Zig Ziglar sitting next to me. I've got Brian Tracy over there. There's Tony Alessandro, Warren Grush, all of the people who I had inspired me, and they're sitting around the table telling me their secrets, how they became successful, telling me their stories. It was absolutely amazing. And I came back, and this is the only way I can describe it. I went there, when I went there I was speaking professionally. When I came back, I was a professional speaker. That's the difference it made. Suddenly, I was part of this global culture. It wasn't just Americans. There were lots of my friends from the States, Max Hitchens, David Price, Amanda Gore, all the top speakers there. And of course, 2 people particularly who really, really have blown me away I've met was W. Mitchell. Have any of you actually met W. Mitchell yet? Or I'm going to tell you something about W. Mitchell, just to help. And W. Mitchell, as a young man, was riding a motorbike. He was going into an intersection, went across it. A truck didn't stop, hit his bike, smacked him down the road. The petrol cap flew off, the petrol flowed all over him. The sparks ignited the petrol, turned him and the bike into a ball of flame. They weren't sure that he would live. They took pieces of skin that hadn't been burnt on his back and rump and pieced together a face that resembled the picture that they'd been given. That was the closest they could get. He's got these stumps for hands, and he is, as I would can only describe it, a patchwork quilt of a man. Alan Lord, who was there, said, "Come on, you've got to meet Mitchell." And he went to introduce me. And have you ever met somebody who's been massively disfigured? What do you do? Do you ignore the fact that they're massively disfigured? I won't see that. It's like saying, "I don't see that you're black." Well, yeah, if you're blind, if you don't, it's just you cannot not see that somebody is different. You cannot not see that somebody has had severe burns. That this isn't a hand, this is a stump that's coming out. And I'm going, and suddenly a lesson I learned from Mitchell was this. He said, "Rikki, come, sit down. Let me tell you a story." And he told me his story. Oh, he hadn't actually he wasn't in a wheelchair at the time when the fire happened, but then he learned to fly a plane, crashed the plane and broke his back. So just to add. But this is the guy who, with all of that, then stood for mayor under the banner, W. Mitchell, not just another pretty face. You know? If you ever see him speak, he rolls around the platform, he says, have you ever been to prison? I have, every single day of my life. But it's not what happens to you that matters, it's what you do about it. But what he taught me was that if I am different, because that was before I changed gender, if I'm different, and people are going to find that difficult, I have to take responsibility for helping them to accept who I am. Because they can't do it all by themselves, because they haven't got the experience. And he took the responsibility for helping me to understand. 5 minutes of talking to him, I was no longer aware of the disfigurement. I was only aware of this amazing person that I was speaking to. That lesson helped me because in 2003 I was in a taxi going from Raffles back to my hotel in Singapore, and I'm in the taxi with a guy called Ron Lee, the ninja speaker from in Australia. He said, I had by this time now changed gender. He said, so you used to be Rikki Arundel? I said, yeah. He said, well, I knew you. I said, I know you did. He said, I didn't like you. Somebody else read a little article when I attended one of this lovely life I lived. Somebody wrote a really amazing article. Nancy Vogel, a bureau owner from the States, and she wrote this article and she said, the most amazing thing at this convention was meeting Rikki Arundel. It wasn't the amazing transformation from Richard to Rikki, it was the fact that she simply sparkled as a human being. I thought, oh my God. And then I bumped into my niece one day. She said, oh my God, I can't believe how nice a person you've become. You were horrible. What is this? And then I started to realize that this is all about finding who you are. When you find who you are and let who you are out, suddenly people engage. Suddenly they like you. Take down those barriers. Be who you really are. Don't be up here as the speaker, trying to play the game, trying to be what you've seen. Be you. And that means find your stories and tell your stories. When I came back, we put together from Minneapolis. It took me 4 years, but I finally, I've been talking about it so much. So Alan Lord had been interested in doing something, and then he sort of faded away and said he was going to retire. And then I started talking to some of the people in the life insurance industry, and one friend of mine, Brendan Power, happened to be in San Francisco for $1 million roundtable meeting. There happened to be an NSA chapter meeting. He attended it, came back, oh, you've got to help, we've got to do this. And suddenly I had an ally, somebody pushing me from behind. Graham Davis had joined the NSA. He didn't want to be involved in the Politburo, as he called the PSA board, but he said I wanted to help. I got Philip Campani, I said come along, and then we heard that there's another guy sailing a boat, this is Rex Warner. Anybody come across Rex Warner? Here's a man with courage. He sailed a raft across the Pacific Ocean, shark-infested water, on a little raft, and he can't even swim. But then motivation. That was it. He's a motivational speaker. He does a hugely stupid expedition, and then he tells stories about it for the next 2 years until he figures out his next crazy expedition that he's going to do. And he had some connections, and so before we knew what had happened, we'd had a really good steering group together. We were all set to launch in October 1998, and I just got busy. I went to a convention, and before we got a meeting together, we said it's just too late. We need to get some time. So we said, okay, fine, we'll postpone to January 30th, 99, but start the marketing now. We launched 120 people at that first meeting. Alan Pease opened a second meeting. We had about 120 at that meeting, and that was it. We were off and running. It wasn't all plain sailing. We nearly died 3 years later because we hadn't paid some big bills. But I'm going to write the story. I'll put the whole story down. But there you go. That was the PSA that started. So, just back to storytelling. Can you see how you can keep a whole talk going just by adding stories in? You can run from one story to another, you can entertain people, and you can make points out of stories that actually make sense. And you can tell what you want. You can give your message by not even bothering to tell the message, just tell the story. that means people get the message without you even needing to tell them. And they've done the work. And they'll remember it, because they remember the story. Why are you speakers? Why do you do it? Why do you do it? Why do you want to do this crazy business? Why on earth would you want to do it?
To inspire people.
To connect.
What?
To inspire people.
To what?
To change.
Check.
Fulfill their potential, do what they want to do.
Okay. I'm going to suggest it's actually a bigger goal than that. Certainly my goal. Go on.
I just want to tell a story.
So you want to tell stories, yeah? Okay, but why?
For my benefit,
For your benefit?
Get something off my chest, but also to engage people, see people smile.
Yeah, to entertain.
Intrigue.
Change the world.
I want people to see the world completely differently and enjoy it more.
Thank you. But this is the one I was looking for.
How
To change the world. I want to change the world. It's as simple as that. I want to change the world. One story at a time, one speech at a time. I'm going to change the world. My trip to the NSA wasn't that impactful in terms of drama. It was just a trip to a convention that was quite inspiring. But it changed me. I came back a different person. And because I was a different person, I was able to inspire other people to join me and pull this thing together and get the whole thing running. When I think about it, that one trip on the 14th of July, 1995, has impacted the lives of millions of people. Frank Furness was an unknown speaker. Nigel Risner had hardly spoken to anybody. Paul McGee, nobody knew about him. They all joined the PSA and built their careers. Richard McCann joined the PSA at the time when, because it was Nicky Passington brought him along and said, oh, this guy's great, he's going to be a good speaker. And I met him then when he told his first story for the first time. But this is it, one idea changed the lives of millions of people. Now, it wasn't me who did it, I just set the ball rolling. But once it got momentum, that was it, it got picked up and everybody went with it, and the whole thing just gained that viral connection that I didn't have to do anything with anymore. It was taking itself. And that's what we're trying to do with speakers, isn't it? We're trying to change the world. And all you need to do is to change one person. Imagine if you influenced Bill Gates. How much impact would it have if something you said made him think, oh, I'll do something about that? You have no idea how much impact you're going to have on them. So, I've talked about the earlier on about this importance about remember my name, remember my message, and take some action. That's the three things we've got to do with this. And we use stories to do that because that's the way. My goal today, inspire you to use stories to change the world. That's my goal. I want you to start thinking about putting more stories into what you speak about. And I want to talk particularly about Aristotle. Because the art of storytelling goes back such a long way. Do you know the oldest piece of written text ever found is a poem? It's a poem, and it's a long drama type poem, sort of the Odyssey of Homer type of thing, but older than that. It's the same story as every James Bond film. They've modelled all the James Bond films on that very same story. So we know that storytelling has been at the heart of history. I mean, the Bible, you think, oh, we read all this stuff written down. It was nearly 100 years after it happened that somebody even wrote anything down. How did it carry that far? Because most of it was told in rhymes, in stories, in parables, in stories that were passed around, and eventually somebody collated them. The stories of Robin Hood. Who the hell was Robin Hood? We have got no idea. But the story, which the bards told around, the stories of Dick Turpin, these stories have just become, part of culture because they're embedded in stories and they last forever. And somehow there's a little message in them all. So, Aristotle came up with three great proofs. Now, have any of you read Carmine Gallo's book? Yeah, brilliant book. He has looked at TED Talks and said, what makes these TED Talks really work? And he's looked at about 200 of them, analysed and put them together. And in particular, he looked at the most persuasive TED Talk of all time. And that was delivered by a man called Brian Stevenson. You may or may not have read the talk. Brian Stevenson runs a social enterprise in Chicago that helps poor black kids in the main to tackle and get their lives back on track. Kids who in the main are going to end up going down the current path which puts pretty much most of them into gangs and eventually into jail and dead. And he helps to get these kids out of those gangs and into work and into having self-esteem and moving themselves forward. So he told a story on the TED stage. At the end of that speech, the TED audience donated into his, or invested into his social enterprise without him asking for it, over $1 million. That's a persuasive speech. That inspired people to take action. When Carmine Gallo looked at it, he said, this is what happened. He said, in that speech, and this is a social justice lawyer doing this speech, 10% was what Aristotle called his proof of ethos, credibility. 10% of Stevenson's speech was about him and his credibility and why he was doing it. 25% of that speech was logos, facts, information, figures, details about the problems of kids in Chicago. But a full 65% of that talk was pathos. It was stories. Stories he told about his grandma and his ma and the way in which he was brought up and the impact that that had on his life and his morals and how that helped people to go forward. And that's what we're going to think about. When you're looking at your speeches, a full 65% of powerful speeches is stories. Pack your talk with stories. Make a point, tell a story. Make a point, tell a story all the time. And the more you do that, the more entertaining your speech will become. And even if you're doing to corporates, because trust me, the last thing they want to hear is another boring presentation from the vice president of whatever on their annual report. I saw a brilliant one. The NSA did a good accountants report once. So there's some guys in the States, and you've probably seen them on telly sometimes, that they do some silly juggling. Like they juggle with sickles, they juggle with chainsaws, and they juggle with these sorts of crazy things. So these guys come on stage, and they were doing some stuff at that particular convention. So it was a speaker who came up to deliver the accountant's report, the treasurer's report. And while he was doing it, the two guys are doing sickle juggling back on either side of him as he's reading the sickle. That made the whole, if you want a little bit of peril, that's exactly what was happening there. So we know that telling a story makes your message, makes your talk 20 times more memorable than just telling facts alone. You've noticed that most of the charities now don't give lots and lots of facts and information about poverty and everything else. They pick a little story. We were on the way up here, and I'm going to the loo, and I'm looked at, and there's the one I've seen it so often. She's lost her house, and now she has her period. Yeah. It's one girl. Donate £5, make this girl's life better. It's one person's story, and they know that is twice as much money comes in from single story campaigns as all of the other. Even if you put single story combined with lots of facts, it doesn't do it. Single stories is what actually draws the money in. That's what people donate to. So where do your stories come from? Oh, one thing I will say, they've done some research in Princeton University, and what they did was they got people telling stories, and then they got people listening to stories, and they put MRI, wired them all up to MRI scans, and they tracked the brainwave patterns of the people telling stories and matched it against people listening to stories, and what they found, a complete match. When you tell a story, your audience completely connects with you. It's like they're just completely in sync. Hearing what you're saying, connecting what you're saying, feeling what you're feeling, because the story engages emotions, and that goes beyond rational thinking and logic. So, where do we get for our stories? Where do we go for them? My suggestion for great stories is, first of all, by the way, just keep me some ideas on time so I know where I'm. Oops. Oh. Just give me a 5 minute and I'll.
Yeah, 15 minutes. 15,
okay, fine. So, Draw a timeline. Look at a timeline of your life and just start to have a look at all of the key things that have happened in your life. What are the main moments where things have happened? Now, what you're looking for in particular, how many of you are now in the place where you thought you were going to be when you were 10, 15 years old? How many of you are nowhere near where you thought you were going to be? Hello, are you actually there? Yeah? You're right there. There are some people, there are one or two, you get the odd one or two people, I'm going to be an astronaut, and there we go, 20 years later they're an astronaut, you think, wow, they got it. You know, I was going to be a nuclear engineer. Absolutely, I was dead set, I am going to be a nuclear engineer. I only needed 3 C's, I had my place at Queen Mary College all set up, 3 C's, my God, this is a shoo-in, isn't it? All I needed maths, applied maths and physics at grade C, and I'm in, I can become a nuclear engineer. I got 1 E. So I got back to college. I thought, oh, what am I going to do? And somebody had mentioned to me like social sciences. I hadn't a clue what they were. I thought, all right, we'll do social sciences because that sounds like an easy way. My mum and dad said, right, you've got 1 year, and then that's it. You're on your own. You've got to sort it out. So back to college for 1 year. No financial support, but they would actually help me. I'd been at Butlins, so I'd earned a bit of money there. Doing a Butlins hot season in the bars and things. So there I am, sort of sitting there. I've got myself sorted out. I'm sitting next, chatting to a friend of mine. He's doing commerce. I'm doing now economics and sociology and retaking maths and doing a few other things. He said, why don't you do drama this year? Because they had a college play every year, and basically the college play was always the Shakespeare play. And I was like, Shakespeare and me aren't friends. I don't really do Shakespeare. And these girls walked past. Now, bear in mind, I'm a young 19-year-old guy, it's an 18-year-old guy at the time. These girls walked past and I made a comment and he said, you should see them in their bra and knickers. I said, what? We've only got 1 changing room in the drama group. I said, okay, I'll audition. It's just, yeah, it was then. So I auditioned and I found out there was, my friend had already got the part of Cassius, another guy who was really good and got Brutus. There's one big part left, Mark Antony. I learnt nearly all of it before the auditions. I thought, I'm going to have no way I'm doing this and just getting a minor part. I'm going to do it. So up I went, friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me. I did the whole thing brilliantly. And he said, oh, carry on. I thought, I'll learn the rest. Keep on. So I kept on going. He said, all right, very good. Anybody else? And all the other people who were going to compete said, no, that's all right. We'll not bother. He said, okay, if you want the part, you need to take drama classes as well. I said, really? So I looked at the drama group, and as it happened, almost everything but 1 class in the entire full-time drama course fitted in with my blank periods. I thought, oh, well, might as well do drama. And that was the beginning of my speaking career. All because of a comment from a friend sitting on the steps of the college, and I got involved, and suddenly I just got the buzz for it when I was on stage. But can you see? You go back and you think, what was it happen? What were the things that took me to where I am? What directed me? That was a redirection point. I can go back to my timeline and know at that moment in time, my life started to move in another direction that previously hadn't. The whole engineering science thing was suddenly gone. I was moving into the arts, and that was the direction I was going to take. Now, I did do the economics, I did get involved in insurance, but I kept getting drawn back to speaking and training because I got the bug for being in front of audiences. And I loved it and I wanted to be there. So I know that that point, things started. So what you've got to do is look at the things that have happened and then try and track it back. What was the point at which this story started? What was the incident? What was that moment? Attending a meeting, listening to a speech, a conversation with a friend. It's often something very, very minor. It might be something quite major. I bought my first house in 1975, and I got a very, very cheap mortgage from the insurance company I was working for. And the people said, fine, have the carpets, pay us later. Have the washing machine, pay us later. Have the car, pay us later. No, have the... pay us later. You can, and everybody said, pay us later. And it was all great. They said, no, it's okay. You can just pay us later. Just do it. It'll be on credit. You don't have to pay anything for 6 months. 6 months later, everybody wanted their money back. And I suddenly thought, And I worked it out, and actually, I didn't earn enough money to pay everything back. I'm suddenly finding my income, and I'm thinking, what do I do? I've got to get. So I got myself a job driving taxis. I'm driving the late shift on Fridays and Saturday nights. I'd come home from London up to Bedford, where I live, go straight to Bedford, into the taxi, drive the taxi all the way through the night, go home, sleep, back out all through the night, Saturday morning, sleep, and back to work again. That was my routine for about 9 months, until February the 14th. 1976. I'm driving home round this corner, and I just didn't spot that little bit of black ice on the corner. The taxi went to spin, and then it spun again, and I held it and back again, and then it tipped over and dropped and bent the roof. I was quite safe. I got out. I phoned the guy. I said, I've bent the taxi. He said, where? I said, well, the roof. I got fired that day. And I thought, what the hell am I going to do? I thought, this is crazy. And I picked up the newspaper on the way home, and somebody's advertising this job to basically sell cookware, multi-level marketing. I thought, well, I might as well try this. So I gave it a try. And a week later, this guy who recruited me said, look, we've decided we're going to go and open a restaurant down in Devon. We've got all these parties lined up. Well, do you want to take them on? I said, yeah. I couldn't believe it. Within 4 months, I was earning more part-time than I was in my full-time job. And suddenly I had sales experience. And suddenly it had actually been a block. I was actually involved in a company doing sales training, but I wasn't allowed to do most of it because I didn't have any sales experience. And all of a sudden, my whole life, in terms of my sales career and the speaking and everything that happened for the next 20 years, all changed because I drove just too quickly round a corner one Valentine's Day morning and bent the roof on a taxi. So sometimes it's just a little bit dramatic, but can you see how you can take these things, and once you realise where it started, you can take that little point, and it's a nice place to start because you can suddenly say, Valentine's Day, such and such a day, 14th of July, 1974. And the moment you say that to people, they go, no, what happened there? It's almost like once upon a time. And you draw people in and into your story. Oh, I want to know what happens. Where's this going to go? And you bring people through to it. So, right. So things you want to look for. Moments of triumph. Things that you really went well. Not always good stories. If you basically started something, you were uber successful and ran through and you were mega successful and never ever went wrong, you're not going to inspire people. Because they're going to say, oh, yeah, your parents probably helped you. Oh, you had the breaks, you had the luck. Yeah. Crash and burn, put it back together. Now we all want to hear. We want to hear that you messed up, you screwed up. So where were the screw-ups? Where were the times when you absolutely blew it? And how did you pull it back together? How did you turn that around? How did you pull back forward? That's my trans story. Now, I've done so much out of it, and another Karen will know. Yeah, it ain't a thing. It's not a decision you make lightly. I didn't sort of get up one morning and you think, yeah, know what, life's not tough enough, I think I'll wear a dress. You don't make this decision lightly, because it isn't going to be easy. It's a hell of a lot tougher than I thought it was going to be, and I'm not sure. Yeah, so there we go. Sometimes just look around for little stories. Sometimes little stories happen around you. And this was something that happened to me back in the... I'm walking on a walk through a park, and I'm just sort of just gently going for a walk, and up ahead of me I could see a little lad standing on this big tree trunk. Well, the tree trunk had sort of been fallen down, they cut all the branches off, so it was left there now as a climbing frame for kids. And this little kid, he can only have been like 3-4 years old, and he's up on top of the thing. It's nearly twice his height, and he's standing there, and his mum's sort of nonchalant, just standing there looking at the ducks and just not really paying any attention. And I could see his whole body changing. I could see him. I thought, he's going to jump. You could just see he's looking at the pressure. You've got to imagine, this is twice his height. And he's jumping. And suddenly he went, and off he went, he jumped. And at that moment, his mother saw him. She screamed, "Ah!" and grabbed his foot Too late. He'd already jumped. His head went boom down. Hit the bottom. Oh no! She dragged him. She just stupid little get him back. Oh God! I've often thought about that story and wondered how many times, as that kid's grown older, has he been about to take a risk? I thought, nah, might hurt my head. Mum might smack me. Didn't think that, but just something held him back, because at that moment, instead of letting him have the jump, she intervened and stopped that little risk, that little peril. So, so those are all sorts of things. Oh, I get people tell me all the time, oh, I've got no real stories. I've got no stories. I've done a public speaking course. And I got this woman saying, no, I've got no, my life's really boring, I don't do anything, I never do anything. And I had this exercise, I wanted people to tell a story about from their life, and she just absolutely refused. She told something, it wasn't really a story at all. She was really bumbling, and it just didn't work. And I thought, what's this crazy? And at break time, I just happened to overhear her talking about her holiday she'd just come back from, where she had spent 2 weeks trekking through the Peruvian Andes. Why didn't you have a story? We've got these stories and they're all there and we don't use them. So start collating every single story you've got. You never know how you can use it, when you can use it, but you need to know what's the point. What does this story tell you? What's the message in it? A little story, I mean, that wasn't my story, it was my experience. I saw a little kid. Nobody else really saw that. I was the only one who actually observed what happened. And I'm able to use that story from myself and the impact it had on me and how I think that might affect other people. And hopefully other people will remember that and think, okay, fine, let's not do things that limit ourselves. Now, I want to briefly tell you about another bit of Aristotle, because I notice I've not got very much time left here now. Pen's here. Aristotle talked about 3 things: pity, fear, catharsis. It's the 3-act play. Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. So in Act 1, we establish pity. I want you to connect with me. I want you to understand I'm setting the scene. I want you to understand where I am and where I'm coming from and what's going on. And I'm going to reach forward until we finally get to the end of Act 1. At the end of Act 1, just as we move here, we reach plot point 1. This is basic novel writing as well, by the way. It's the same sequence, same thing. The difference between an anecdote and a story: fear. You see, what happens with a story is this. All stories need this basic premise. Someone wants something, has difficulty getting it. Act 1, plot point 1 is the point at which we are called to the adventure. This is the point at which we know we have to go on a major adventure. This is the point where things are going to change. Nothing will ever be the same. There is no way back. Okay, you've launched yourself out on your adventure and you cannot stop it now. You know that somewhere or another you're going to have to go through to the end, but this is it. You've been called out. Plot point 1, and the adventure starts. We build up to a midpoint. The midpoint, usually somewhere in here, the midpoint is the point at which our heroine is about to give up. Nothing is going right. It's all not working. Everything's so hard, it's difficult. And something happens. Some little chink there that happens, and we start to realise what's happening. And then we move forward to the plot point 2. Plot point 2 is the point at which James Bond is captured by the baddie and is about to die. Plot point 2 is when Luke Skywalker gets into the chamber that's going to crush them to death. These are these plot points that take. This is when we are facing the demons. It's the point at which Henry V is facing 10,000 fresh French soldiers with 500 raggle-tag Englishmen and a few bowmen. And how many of you know the speech, St. Crispin's Day speech? You've heard that? No? You've never heard the St. Crispin's Day speech? Go on YouTube, find it. Kenneth Branagh delivering the St. Crispin's Day speech. It's plot point 2. It's the point at which everything is about to go down, and he delivers that one speech and says, "We may all die today, but at least you will know you were here." And they go into that, knowing that they may die. It's make or break. And of course they win. And then we get to the resolution. 'Twas brig, and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wave. All mimsy were the borogroves, and the mome raths out grey. Set the scene. Beware the Jabberwock, my son, with jaws that bite and claws that snatch. Beware the jump bird, and shun the frumious brandersnatch. Plot point 1. Call to action. He took his vorpal sword in hand, long time the manxome foe he sought, then rested he by a tum-tum tree and stood a while in thought. We're at the midpoint. Frustration, disillusionment. But while in offish thought he stood, the Jabberwock with eyes aflame came whistling through the tulgey wood and burbled as he came. Plot point 2, make or break, 1, 2, 1, 2, and through, the vorpal blade went stick-a-snack. He left it dead, and with its head he went galumphing home. And hast thou slain the Jabberwock? Oh, come to my arms, my beamish boy. Oh, rapturous day, Kaloo-Kalay, he jockled in his joy. Resolution. 'Twas brillig, and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wave. All mimsy were the borogroves, and the mome raths outgrabe. Okay, so the world has not changed, but he has. Thank you.
I'm glad you stayed. Wasn't that amazing? Absolutely fantastic. It's really hard to follow that, really.
Let's just all go.
To draw the line, otherwise, absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing all of your knowledge and experience and stories as well. With you could drop a pin, really, couldn't you? It was absolutely fantastic. Really enjoyed that. I think, is it true that you will be at Inspire?
I will be at Inspire.
Well, get your tickets now, honestly, really. So yeah, we're really, really honoured to have Rikki here and she's come a long way to spend some time with us, and we're so lucky to actually get her before Inspire. So that's brilliant, and thank you so much.
Different talk at Inspire.
Yeah.
Having your guts bigger.
Richard and I are really honoured that the founder, one of the founders of PSA has come to our first meeting. So, thank you so much. Rikki works with executives and entrepreneurs, especially women, who seek to develop outstanding speaking skills to unleash their own authentic voice, and you can see why. Instead of really imitating other people, which often that's what we're taught to, and that's one of the reasons why I have a bit of a bugbear with Toastmasters as well, in that it's so structured and it's difficult to develop your own voice. And I'm certainly through storytelling as well, your own story.
I've got a Facebook group at the moment. I'm just building this. If you want to come along, eSpeaker Live, just come and join. I'm really wanting to work with people who are looking at developing their speaking skills, but also particularly developing online speaking skills. So I'm going to be doing some masterminding in there. I'm going to be doing some, it's got a place where you can actually practice your own online speaking. I'm going to be doing online workshops using Zoom and that. There will be some charged services on there, but a lot of this initially is just free. Just come and join. If you want some personal work from me, then we can talk about that later. But,
So it's eSpeakers.
if you just go Facebook, eSpeaker Live group. There is an eSpeaker, there's an eSpeaker.com website, but it's currently nothing there. I've got the site in place. I've got the domain name there. I've owned eSpeaker for a long time. It was my main domain back before I changed my gender. I traded under eSpeaker until I switched to Gender Speaker. Now I'm going back to eSpeakers because it's
So who's joining Rikki on eSpeaker Live?
just
Yeah. Done. Already done.
Excellent. So just share on there. I want to make it a very active group. Lots of sharing. It's all about just trying to help each other develop, particularly our online speaking. But it's the same skills that you're going to use online as you use offline. It's just I think we've all as speakers got to start understanding that online speaking is here to stay. It's and I don't know about you. How many of you really hate seeing yourself on video? Yeah. Good. Best way to overcome it? Do a 31-day live challenge. Just go on live every day for 31 days, and you will move through all the fear. And you'll make a mess to start with, but invite some people in, interview them. Come and join us there. We'll just play with. There's a few people there who are really good on online speaking, and you probably know Lottie. I mean, you're Lottie. Yeah, Lottie's. I'm doing a bit of work with Lottie. So yeah, we're just trying to help speakers get through this and help ourselves because I'm on the same path. Halfway through developing my first online course, so it's really hard, isn't it, to take what you do live and then put it onto something that's very static and there's no engagement and you can't get the feedback. And you think, and this is what I'm trying to find. How do we make those? How do we take what we do and that passion and energy that we've got as professional speakers and turn that into something online and make it better than the sort of
Have you ever done those? They do them at events where you have it's like a silent disco for the speaker, so everybody's because it's in a crowded hall, and and so everybody in the audience. So I know a couple of friends who've done speaks it, and they hate it because you're just talking to yourself basically, which is a very similar thing.
That's it.
There's no reaction.
You're talking to a camera.
Have you ever done that?
I haven't done that, but I've sat in a room talking to a camera, and it really takes a while to get to the point of actually beginning to realise that camera is actually a group of people.
Yeah.
And to look at the camera instead of looking at the bloody screen as well. It just.
Actually, it's the difference with the video. I mean, my humble. I'm married to a photographer and videographer, so I've been cured. Because
excellent.
I've realised the rest of the world manages to have a conversation with me without going, "Oh my God, you sound so weird." So I really should get over myself. But it's to think of it. It's not people. It's person.
Yes.
And the thing that you get to do with the camera is talk to a person. And that actually you can get a really nice connection going if you think about it as one-to-one rather than broadcast.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just,
excellent. But anyway, come along. I've got a couple of years' experience now, so I can add some stuff in. We're using BeLive and Zoom and what was the one we spoke on? Appearing. There's another one I've been using, and it's quite good for just generally speaking. Oh yeah, we couldn't get the.
We did Crowdcast.
We did Crowdcast and we did Appearing to start with.
Yeah, we did. Yeah. Anyway, I would
there we go.
Love to thank you for coming and showing our appreciation. So thank you. I'd like to hand over to. Am I handing over to my partner in crime? Actually, I'm handing to. Am I handing over to you?
yeah.
Are you not? Yeah. Us three. Right. Okay. I would like to hand over to our membership group, who is. You're looking at me scared. Thank you, Antoinette. Sorry.